Pride and Joy by Etgar Keret, read by Robert Sean Leonard.
By the end of the first term, Ehud Guznik was already the tallest boy in his class, maybe even in the whole grade. And besides that, he had a new sports bike, a squat, hairy dog with the eyes of one of those old men who've been waiting in line at the public health clinic all morning, a girlfriend from his class who wouldn't kiss on the mouth but let him touch the boobs she didn't have, and a straight-A report card except for geography, and even that was because the teacher was a bitch. In short, Ehud had nothing to complain about, and his parents were bursting with pride. You couldn't bump into them without having to listen to a little anecdote about their amazing child, and people, like people, would nod at them in a mixture of boredom and genuine admiration and say, "Wonderful, Mr. Mrs. Guznik. That's really wonderful." But what really counts isn't what people say to your face. It's what they say behind your back. And behind their backs, the first thing people said about Max and Felicia Guznik was that they kept getting smaller. Over a single winter, they seemed to have lost at least 9 inches each. Mrs. Guznik, once considered imposing, now barely reached the breakfast cereal shelf in the grocery store. And Max, too, who once stood close to 5'10", had already moved the car seat all the way forward so that he could reach the gas pedal. Very unpleasant. And all the more obvious when they stood next to their giant of a son, only in 4th grade, but already a head taller than his mommy. Every Tuesday afternoon, Ehud went to the schoolyard with his father to play basketball. Ehud's father thought Ehud had great potential because he was both tall and smart. All through history, the Jews were always considered a smart people, but very short, he liked to explain. And even once in a blue moon, when a big schlub did get born, for some reason he always turned out to be such a knucklehead that you couldn't even teach him a hook shot. But you could teach Ehud, and he got better from week to week. And lately, ever since his father started getting shorter, they were evenly matched. "You," his father would tell him on the way home from the court, "you will be a great player someday, the Moshe Dayan of basketball, except without the patch." The compliments made Ehud very proud, even though he'd never seen Moshe Dayan shoot hoops. But even more than he was proud, he was worried. Worried about the scary way his parents were getting shorter. Maybe all parents were like that, he sometimes tried to reassure himself out loud. And next year they'll teach us about it in science class. But deep in his heart, he knew something was wrong. Especially after Netta, who'd said yes when he asked her to go study with him 5 months before, swore to him on the Bible that her parents, from the time she was little, had stayed more or less the same height. The truth was that he wanted to talk to them about it, but he felt that there were things it was better not to talk about. Netta, for example, had a kind of light fuzz on her cheeks, like a beard. Ehud always pretended he didn't notice because he thought maybe she herself didn't know. And if he told her, she'd just feel bad. Maybe it was the same thing with his parents. Or maybe if they did know, they were still glad he didn't notice. Things went on like that until after Passover. Ehud's parents kept getting smaller, and he kept acting as if nothing was happening. And the truth is, no one would ever have figured it out if it hadn't been for Zayda. From the time he was a puppy, Ehud's dog was attracted to old people. That's why his favorite thing was walking in King David Park, where all the old people from the retirement home went to get some air. Zayda could sit next to them and listen to their long stories for hours. They were also the ones who gave him the name, Zayda, Grandpa, a name he liked a whole lot better than the original Jimmy he got at the pound. Of all the old men, Zayda's favorite was an old geezer in the billed cap who talked to him in Yiddish and fed him blood sausage. Ehud also liked that old man, who made Ehud swear, the first time they met, never to get on an elevator with Zeta, because, according to him, dogs don't understand the concept of an elevator. And going into a kind of small room in one place and then seeing the doors open on another place altogether shakes their confidence in their spatial perception and, in general, makes them feel extremely inferior. He didn't offer Ehud any blood sausage, but he did treat him to jelly beans and chocolate coins wrapped in gold. That old man must have died or moved to a different home because they didn't see him in the park anymore. Sometimes Zeta still barked and ran after a different old man who looked enough like him and then whimpered a little when he found out he was wrong, but that was all. One day, after Passover, Ehud came home from school in a bad mood, and when he finished walking Zeta, he didn't feel like going up the stairs. So they took the elevator. He felt a little guilty as he pressed the 4 button, but said to himself that the old man was probably dead anyway, which definitely meant he didn't have to keep his promise. And when the elevator door opened, Zeta peered out, walked into the hall, back into the elevator, contemplated for a second, and fainted dead away. Ehud and his frightened parents went straight to the vet, who reassured them right away about the dog, but the vet was much more than your ordinary vet. He was a family doctor and gynecologist from South America, who, at some point in his life, for personal reasons, had decided to treat animals. And that doctor needed only one look to realize that the Guzniks were suffering from a rare family disease, a disease that resulted in Ehud's growing taller and taller, but at his parents' expense. It's simple math, the vet explained. Every inch added to the child is an inch subtracted from the parents. And this disease, Ehud probed, when does it end? End? The vet tried to camouflage his sorrow behind his thick Argentinian accent. Only when the parents disappear. All the way home, Ehud cried, and his parents tried to comfort him. Strangely enough, their terrible fate didn't bother them at all. In fact, they even seemed to enjoy it a little. Lots of parents are dying to sacrifice everything for their children, his mother explained to him when he was already in bed. But not all of them get the chance. Do you know how awful it is to be like Aunt Bella, who sees her son growing up to be short, stupid, and untalented just like his father, and she can't do a thing about it? Okay, it's true that in the end we'll disappear, but so what? In the end, everyone dies, and your father and me, we won't even die. We'll just disappear. The next day, Ehud went to school without really feeling like it and got thrown out of Bible class again. He was sitting on the steps near the gym, feeling sorry for himself, when he suddenly realized something. If he grew an inch at his parents' expense, all he had to do was to save them was to stop growing. Ehud hurried to the nurse's office and slyly asked for all the information she had on the subject. And from all the brochures she shoved at him, Ehud learned that if he wanted to put up a real fight against growing, what he had to do was smoke a lot, eat little and not regularly, and sleep even less, preferably with lots of interruptions. He gave his 10 o'clock recess sandwich to Shiri, a nice, chubby girl from the other 4th grade class. He ate as little as he could at meals, and to keep people from suspecting, he always passed the meat and dessert to his faithful dog, who waited under the table with sad eyes. The sleeping thing worked out by itself, because since that meeting with the vet, he couldn't sleep for 10 minutes without waking up from scary, guilt-ridden nightmares, which left the business with the cigarettes. He smoked 2 packs a day of cheap, unfiltered cigarettes. 2 whole packs, not 1 cigarette less. His eyes got red, his mouth filled with a bitter taste, and he also started to cough. An old man's cough. But not for a minute did he think of stopping. A year and something later, On the day report cards were formally handed out, Matt Zlotnitsky and Raz Samara were already taller than he was. Raz also became Netta's new boyfriend after she dumped Ehud because of the bad breath he'd developed. In fact, that year, Ehud's popularity declined. To tell the truth, the kids stopped talking to him completely because they said his chronic cough got on their nerves, and besides, his marks were going down and he wasn't good at sports anymore. The only one who still spoke to him was Shiri, who had started out liking him because of the sandwiches, but later took to him because of his personality and other things, and they spent hours together, talking about all kinds of stuff he'd never talked about with Netta. Ehud's parents stopped shrinking at 8 inches, and after the doctor confirmed it, Ehud even tried to stop smoking but couldn't. He went to an acupuncturist and a hypnotist, and they both said that the main reason he couldn't stop was pampering and character. But Shiri, who actually liked the smell of cigarettes, consoled him by saying that it really didn't matter. On Saturdays, Ehud would put his parents in his shirt pocket and take them for a bike ride. He pedaled slowly enough for the stout Zeta to keep up with him, and when his parents fought inside his pocket or just got tired of each other, he would move one of them to another pocket. Once Shiri even went with them, and they rode to the park and had a real picnic. And on the way back, when they stopped to look at the sunset, Ehud's father whispered loudly to him from his pocket, "Kiss her, kiss her," which was a little embarrassing. Ehud quickly changed the subject and talked to her about the sun and how hot and big it was, all kinds of things like that, until it was dark, and his parents fell asleep deep in his pocket. When he'd exhausted all his stories about the sun and they'd almost reached Shiri's house, he told her about the moon and the stars too, and their effect on each other. And when those stories were finished too, he coughed and shut up. And Shiri said to him, "Kiss me." And he kissed her. "Way to go, son," he could hear his father whisper from the depths of his pocket. And he felt his emotional mother jab him with her elbow and softly weep with joy.